What is up guys, and welcome back to another YouTube tutorial. My name is Moabi, and today we are going to create our first virtual machine using our Hyper-V manager. So in the last videos, I explained what is Hyper-V, and also we created an external virtual switch for our virtual machines. So now I want us to open up Hyper-V manager, and then we will take a look at how to create your first virtual machine. So to start the process, let's click on the Start menu. Then click Server Manager. This will open up the Server Manager application for you, and we're going to use this application to open up the Hyper-V application. You can also search for the Hyper-V application by clicking on the Search tab, then type in Hyper-V. You will see the Hyper-V Manager. You can click that, and this will open up the Hyper-V console. Once your Hyper-V Manager console opens up, I want you guys to focus on the Actions tab, where you will see your server name, and under your server name, you will see the button New. So click on New, and then select the option Virtual Machine. This will open up the new Virtual Machine wizard, and in this window, you will see a Before You Begin page. In this page, it lets you know that this wizard helps you create a virtual machine. You can use a virtual machine in place of a physical computer for a variety of uses. You can use the wizard to configure the virtual machine now, and you can change the configuration later using Hyper-V Manager. To create a virtual machine, do one of the following. Click Finish to create a virtual machine that is configured with default values, or click Next to create a virtual machine with a custom configuration. We are not going to click the button Finish because I want to show you guys a step-by-step of how to create and configure your virtual machine. Let's start the process to create our very own virtual machine. So click on the button Next. Once you click Next, you will see a specified name and location. Now, we need to give our virtual machine a name. The reason for that is so that we can identify our virtual machine in our Hyper-V Manager console. So I'm going to name my virtual machine Windows 10 Test PC. And below the name, you will see a message that says you can create a folder or use an existing folder to store the virtual machine. If you don't select a folder, the virtual machine is stored in the default folder configured for this server. If you remember from the previous video where I installed Hyper-V, I mentioned that we should create our very own special folder where we're going to store our virtual machines. So you can click the button Store this virtual machine in a different location if you want to change the default location. If the folder that you created is not selected in this path, you can click on the button Browse. Then locate the folder where you want your virtual machines to be stored. For this demonstration, I'm going to leave everything as default because when I installed the Hyper-V role, I chose a custom path where my virtual machines will be stored. So I'm going to select the button Cancel. And below the location, you will see a warning that says, if you plan to take checkpoints of this virtual machine, select a location that has enough free space. Checkpoints include virtual machine data and may require a large amount of space. So basically, this is just a warning that informs you that wherever you are storing your virtual machine, make sure that there is enough storage for your virtual machine. So now I'm going to select the button Next. And once we click Next, we see the Specify Generation window. In this window, we need to choose the generation of this virtual machine. Now, if you take note, there are two types of generations, which is Generation 1 and Generation 2. So the first option, which is Generation 1, it basically supports 32-bit and 64-bit guest operating systems, which support legacy and also BIOS settings. This generation is good if you want to install Windows 7 or later generations of Windows for your virtual machine. And if you take a look at Generation 2, this virtual machine generation provides support for newer virtualization features, has UEFI-based firmware, and it requires a supported 64-bit guest operating system, which can be your Windows 8.1, Windows 10, or Windows 11 64-bit architecture operating systems. So for our demonstrations, I will be using the Generation 2 option. So select Generation 2, and just below Generation 2, you will see once a virtual machine has been created, you cannot change its generation. So please be careful of which generation that you select. Keep in mind the operating system that you want to install for your generation. So I will be installing a Windows 10 operating system on this virtual machine, hence I chose the Generation 2 option. So once you click your generation, click on Next. Next, we see the Assign Memory window, and in this window, we need to specify the amount of memory to allocate to this virtual machine. You can choose any memory that you want to allocate to your virtual machine. Please take note of your hardware resources. Make sure that you don't go over your hardware resources. So for this demonstration, I'm only going to allocate 2 gigs of RAM for this virtual machine. So to calculate the amount of RAM that you want to allocate for your virtual machine, all you have to do is click on your search button on your taskbar and then type in calculator. This will open up the calculator application for you, and all you have to do is enter 1024 multiplied by the number of gigs that you want to allocate for your virtual machine. For instance, I want to allocate 2 gigs of RAM, so I'm going to type in 2, and then if I press enter, the result is 2048, which is the number that is needed to allocate 2 gigs of RAM. So if you wanted to allocate 3 gigs or 4 gigs of RAM to your virtual machine, all you have to do is type in 1024 multiplied by 4. This will give you the result 1496, which is equivalent to 4 gigs of RAM. So for the startup memory, I'm going to delete the 1024 and then enter in 2048, which is equals to 2 gigs of RAM. Below the startup memory, you will see a checkbox that is blank with a message that says use dynamic memory for this virtual machine. If you check this box, that means if your virtual machine needs more memory to operate, it will pass and automate the amount of memory that the system requires to run. So I don't recommend that you check this box because I want to set a fixed amount of memory for my virtual machine. Once you have decided the amount of memory that you want to use, click on the button Next. And in the next window, we see Configure Networking. Each virtual machine includes a new network adapter. You can configure the network adapter to use a virtual switch, or it can remain disconnected. Remember in the last video, I showed you guys how to create an external virtual network switch. So next to connection, you will see the drop-down menu, which is not connected. Click on it and then select external switch. If you don't have this, please check out the previous video on how to create an external virtual network switch. This is the network connection that we are going to use for our virtual machine so that our virtual machine can have access to the physical network adapter of our host machine. So I'm going to select the external switch. In this window, you should select your network switch, or else you can leave it as not connected because you can connect your virtual machine to the network using the Hyper-V Manager later. So for this demonstration, I am going to select my external switch, then select the button Next. Once you click Next, you will see Connect Virtual Hard Disk. A virtual machine requires storage so that you can install an operating system. You can specify the storage now or configure it later by modifying the virtual machine's properties. Below this message, you will see 3 options that you can select from, which is create a virtual hard disk, use an existing virtual hard disk, attach a virtual hard disk later. Because this is my very first virtual machine, I'm going to create a virtual hard disk. So for the name, I'm going to leave it as default. And if you take a look at the location, you will see my custom path that I created for this Hyper-V server. In your case, you will see your custom location, or else you will see the default location where this virtual hard disk will be saved. If you want to change this location, all you have to do is click the button Browse, and then select the location where you want to save your virtual hard disk. In my case, my virtual hard disk is stored under Local Disk, Hyper-V Server, and then the folder Virtual Machines Config. I'm going to open the Virtual Machines folder, and in this folder is where my virtual hard disk will be stored. So I'm going to select the button Cancel, because this path has already been selected for my virtual machine. Under location, you will see size. So this is the amount of storage for your virtual machine, and you can increase or decrease this number according to the available amount of storage on your host machine hard disk. So for this demonstration, I'm going to leave everything as default and then click on the button Next. Once we click Next, now you will see the window Installation Options. You can install an operating system now if you have access to the setup media, or you can install it later. And below this message, you will see 3 options that you can select from, which is install an operating system later, install an operating system from a bootable image file, and install an operating system from a network-based installation server. For this demonstration, I'm going to leave the default option install an operating system later selected because I do not have a bootable image file, nor do I have a network-based installation server. I will leave a link in the description below on how to download Windows 10 operating system ISO image. So for this demonstration, I will leave install an operating system later selected and then click the button Next. And now we see a completing the new virtual machine wizard window, and in this window is just a summary of all the options that you have selected for your virtual machine. You will see a message that says, you have successfully completed the new virtual machine wizard. You are about to create the following virtual machine. And below, you will see all the details about the virtual machine that you're about to create. And below this information, you will see to create the virtual machine and close this wizard, click Finish. This will create your virtual machine for you. And once the process is complete, in your Hyper-V Manager, you will note that Windows 10 Test PC has been created. That means this virtual machine has been successfully created. And with that being said, that concludes our video for today. In the next video, I will show you guys how to download the Windows 10 ISO image, how to install a Windows 10 operating system on this virtual machine, and we will also take a look at how we can use Hyper-V Manager to manage our virtual machines. So that is it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Leave a comment or a suggestion in the comment section below. Share the video or the channel with a friend or two. Don't forget to like the video. And lastly, click on the subscribe button for more, and I will see you guys on the next video. Thank you for watching, and remember, each one teach one.